This first sketch is likely one that you have all seen before. About 4 years ago, the topic of R's caught fire on YouTube after creators such as Nexo and Blame It on George made videos discussing it, and today many people immediately associate the sketch with erratas. As a result of the mass popularity that topic got, those two videos, in particular, can be dated back to around 2019, but the origin of the sketch itself can be traced back to 2005. The sketch takes us over to Hawaii, specifically Maui, and the case itself is pretty obscure. On Tuesday, August 26, 2005, several residents contacted police to report that an elderly woman had just been attacked. When police arrived, they were relieved to find that the 72-year-old woman was still alive and had no obvious wounds. After being transported to a hospital to double-check on her condition, investigators went door-to-door in the woman's neighborhood in hopes that someone had gotten a clear look at the man responsible. Luckily, several people did get a solid look at the culprit's face. Officials worked with these witnesses for an entire day and were able to come up with the following sketch. So, on the very next day, the sketch was plastered all over Maui, on telephone poles, bulletin boards, and recreation areas. Along with the image was a description of the man. He stood between 6 feet to 6 feet 3 inches tall and was believed to be a mix of Asian and Hawaiian. His face was long and clean-shaven. Furthermore, it's possible that he owns a white van. After some additional digging, several investigators proposed an interesting detail about this case involving the 72-year-old. Over the last 3 to 4 months, there had been several other cases that were pretty similar. The 72-year-old reported that the unknown man had attempted to rape her, but after triggering an alarm, the man fled in fear of being caught. As a result of this being an assault case, investigators quickly recalled 3 other assault cases that also involved elderly women. One occurred on May 30th of the same year, where an 87-year-old woman was attacked in her home around 3 a.m. This occurred just a couple of miles from the location of the August 26th incident. Then, on June 24th, a 78-year-old woman was raped when she was out for a stroll at around 5:30 a.m. in the exact same area. And on August 17th, another woman in her early 80s was assaulted when she returned home at around 1 to 1:30 p.m. This event occurred about 20 to 30 minutes from the other two. As I stated towards the beginning, this case is pretty obscure, and after trying to find more information, I really couldn't find anything that didn't regurgitate what I already went over. It seemed that whoever this man was, he was never identified or caught. This next sketch is another case that takes place in Hawaii. On July 14, 1995, in Maui, a man had brutally stabbed another person to death. The victim's name was Vilmar Kaking. The attack occurred early in the morning near the Halala Gardens apartments. Vilmar was fast asleep in bed with his girlfriend Serena when all of a sudden they heard a commotion coming from outside of their apartment. Initially, the two just waved off the noise and tried to fall back asleep, but then they heard something break. That's when Vilmar and Serena decided to step out of the apartment, and to their shock, they saw someone trying to steal Vilmar's Honda Civic, or at least that's what it looked like. But the person turned out to actually just be after the components within the vehicle. So, without a second thought, Vilmar rushed over to the man inside of his car, but right as he was at arm's length of the thief, he jumped out of the car and sprinted off. Vilmar decided to pursue the guy. Meanwhile, Serena was trying to get help and was trailing her boyfriend by a fair distance. Eventually, Serena did catch up, and her eyes grew wide when Vilmar shouted to her, "He's got a knife. He's going to kill me." Serena struck the thief in the head, and a brief fight between Vilmar, Serena, and the other man commenced. As the three wrestled with each other, Serena caught a brief glimpse at her arm and noticed some blood. Her gaze then shifted to her boyfriend and the ground. Over the course of their fight, An immense amount of blood had pooled all around them. All three of them were covered in some of it, so it was tough to discern who had sustained the wounds. The thief took this pause as his opportunity to escape, and Serena went to call 911. Medical officials arrived at the scene and transported Vilmar to a hospital, but unfortunately, he died, as he was the one who took most of the blows from the knife. Authorities spent the day interviewing other residents of the apartment complex, as well as people who were simply in the area during the attack and the break-in of Vilmar's vehicle. Most of the witnesses had reported similar accounts to Serena. However, one man claimed that Vilmar was actually the one with the knife. Whether Vilmar was the one carrying it from the start, or if he had simply wrestled it out of the thief's possession, remains unclear. It's also entirely possible that this witness's account is completely wrong. Anyway, after the questioning of the residents was done, and a description of the man was obtained, this was the following police sketch. Investigators would later find out that the man in the sketch was Taryn Christian, whose girlfriend later revealed that Taryn admitted to killing a man after a botched attempt at stealing a radio from the car. Police provided a list of names and faces to Serena and several witnesses and asked them to pick out the man that they saw, assuming that he was even in the provided list. Serena, along with several others, selected Taryn as Vilmar's killer. However, Taryn was adamant that they had the wrong guy, or at the very least, he wasn't responsible for Vilmar's death. You see, Taryn did admit to being part of the fight involving Vilmar and Serena, but according to him, another man was responsible for taking Vilmar's life, this man being James Burkhart. Supposedly, at the time of the crime, James also had longer hair, similar to what is seen in the police sketch, while Taryn had short hair. According to James's legal team, he had a solid alibi, placing him over 30 miles from the scene of the crime. Taryn was understandably really angry and was trying his best to prove that James was the true killer. But in the end, this just fell through, and Taryn was convicted in March of 1997 for Vilmar's death. He received a life sentence with a minimum of 40 years to be served. Even behind bars, Taryn has tried to clear his name and prove that he is not the killer. In 2013, Taryn tried to get the case reopened. He alluded to the likelihood that evidence may have been tampered with, evidence that would have been crucial. Additionally, one of the witnesses who picked out Taryn as the murderer back in the 90s stated that he never actually chose Taryn, instead he chose James. However, the documents pertaining to the identification of the killer have since been lost. Taryn also claimed that Vilmar's girlfriends Serena and James were in a secret relationship and that several people claimed James confessed to Vilmar's murder. Taryn attempted to get these two witnesses to testify in court in his first go-around, but for whatever reason, they were not allowed to. Another interesting detail is that the knife that was used was never recovered. The final sketch we're going to discuss is yet another one that is more well known for its reputation as a sort of meme on the internet, rather than for the killer underneath the sketch. We are going to be stepping back into the 90s to early 2000s, where a serial killer took the lives of at least 7 to 8 women in or near Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Let's start by taking a look at one incident committed by a man named Derek Todd Lee in 2002 that involved a woman named Diane Alexander Vander. One day in early July, Derek was taking a drive before pulling over in Diane's neighborhood. He got out and approached Diane's home before knocking on the door. Diane eventually opened up and said hello. Derek stated that he was lost and needed help with directions to get back home. Diane was skeptical and suspected that something wasn't right, but in that moment where Diane was thinking over her next move, Derek forced himself inside the house and started beating her. Luckily, before Derek could finish off Diane, her son returned home. Derek heard a car pull up in the driveway and immediately took off out the back door of the house. But Diane's son, Alex, was able to briefly see Derek exit the home and get into his car. Alex knew that this man was trouble, so he took off after him, but eventually lost track of the man. Alex returned home, saw his mother on the ground, and rushed to call the police. Diane would be the only person to survive an encounter with Derek Todd Lee. Both Diane and Alex were able to provide very descriptive details of Derek for authorities, which resulted in the following sketch. If you recall, at the beginning, I stated that Derek's crime spree started in the 90s, and the case with Diane occurred in 2002. So up to that point, authorities had a suspicion that maybe several cases were linked. Based on their evidence and research, a profile of the culprit was built, and police thought that their killer was a white male. As you would expect, this caused a lot of time and resources to be wasted on things such as DNA tests on people who had no involvement in the cases. Afterward, the sketch of Derek was released to the public. Not long after, a woman living in Zachary, which is about a 30-minute drive from Baton Rouge, called police to report a peeping Tom. The woman gave the police a description, and when they heard the details of the man, they took a step back and asked themselves, "Hey, is this the same person in that recent sketch?" The officers relayed the information to investigators in Baton Rouge and also informed them that this was possibly a man named Derek Todd Lee. They also provided them with DNA evidence they had obtained from Derek in a previous incident. After double-checking and confirming that this DNA was indeed Derek's, police were eventually able to track him down in May of 2003 and then arrest him in Atlanta, Georgia. After his arrest, officials were able to tie Derek to the murders and assaults of Randy Mabrew in 1998, Green in 2001, and Geraldine DeSoto, Charlotte Pace, Trenesha Collum, and Pam Keenamore, all of whom were murdered in 2002. There was also a victim in 2003 named Carrie Yoder. However, despite having DNA evidence proving that Derek was responsible for all of those deaths I just listed, he was only tried for 2 of them. In August of 2004, he received a life sentence, but due to the jury's concern, this was later changed to a death sentence, which is more than appropriate because this guy was a real POS. Apparently, there were moments where the prosecutors would talk about the victims and Derek would just laugh. In 2016, Derek Lee died of heart disease while he was waiting for his execution in the Louisiana State Penitentiary. Several of the victims I named faced very gruesome deaths after being assaulted. Geraldine DeSoto had a wound on her face that was said to have gone ear to ear, while Charlotte Pace had over 80 knife wounds on her body. From the surface, Derek actually looked like a pretty normal person, kind even, or at least that's what his early friends and family said. After graduating high school, he married and had a couple of kids. He didn't pursue college, but instead worked jobs in construction and such. During his trial, it was also revealed that Derek had faced other charges in 1999 and 2000, which also involved women. One of these cases actually had Derek assaulting an ex-girlfriend of his, but since police had a completely inaccurate profile of the culprit, they never even suspected Derek of being responsible for those other crimes. Towards the start of this entry, I said that Derek is suspected of being involved in at least 7 to 8 murders, but I only listed 7 earlier. There is one woman named Connie Warner, a 41-year-old who went missing in 1992. Police later discovered Connie dead in a lake about a week or 2 later. It's commonly believed that Connie was Derek's first victim. It's also entirely possible that Derek is responsible for many more murders, as Baton Rouge was notorious for its crime at the time. In fact, during that same period when Derek was active, there were at least 2 other serial killers also committing crimes, one of whom is a sick man named Sean Vincent Gillis, who we will be talking about in a later video. If you found this video interesting, make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next deep dive into true crime's most twisted minds. Thanks for watching Criminologist, where we dig deep into the minds of the world's most notorious criminals. Stay safe, and we'll see you in the next video.